Welcome to the Relationship Diversity Podcast, where we celebrate, question, and explore all aspects of relationship structure diversity, from soloamory to monogamy to polyamory and everything in between, because every relationship is as unique as you are. We'll bust through societal programming to break open and dissect everything we thought we knew about relationships, to ask the challenging but transformational questions: who am I, and what do I really want in my relationships? I'm your guide, Carrie Jaroslaw, best-selling author, speaker, intuitive, and coach. Join me as we reimagine all that our most intimate relationships can become. Today's episode is part of our conversation series. I'm just one voice in this relationship diversity movement, and it's important to bring more unique perspectives into the conversation. Today, I'll be talking with Laura Nichols about her journey of living her most authentic, aligned life. She also gives amazing tips on how to start your own journey of awareness and acceptance of your true self. But first, a little about her. Laura Nichols is an authenticity coach, speaker, and queen of the pivot. In her 40-plus years, she has subscribed to conservative Christianity, dismantled her religious beliefs, come out later in life, subsequently gone through a divorce from a 15-year marriage, left her school counseling career, and started a coaching business. Her coaching practice focuses on helping people free themselves from the pain of inauthenticity to connect to the joy of the freedom that comes from living in alignment. Let's get into the conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Relationship Diversity Podcast, where I have my friend Laura Nichols here to talk to us all about living a more authentic life. And the reason I love this discussion and why I feel it is so important in terms of relationship diversity is because I talk about designing your unique relationship based on who you are. And the only way to do that is if you know yourself, you're getting to know yourself, you're acknowledging who you are, accepting who you are, and then designing your vision for a relationship from the authenticity of who you are. And this is why this conversation is going to be so important if you are really questioning who you are and how you move from wondering or not knowing who you are to getting on that journey of understanding yourself, accepting yourself, and loving yourself. So with that, I will say welcome, Laura. I am so happy you're here.
Yay! I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Carrie.
Yeah. So you have a great story all about living an inauthentic life that I remember we've had this conversation. So I know your story that you kind of didn't know
Sure.
about. You didn't have the awareness of, to becoming aware and then moving into more authenticity. So can you tell us about your story and your journey?
Yeah, 100%. So I am just somebody who's never really done inauthenticity well. And
Mm,
I think what I mean by that is I just really am tend to be sensitive to BS, right? I mean,
mm,
ever since I was a young kid. Now that doesn't mean that I was not susceptible to sort of what culture, society, parents, what everyone tells you you should be, because I very much was a people pleaser. However, when things were like deep in my soul, when things went to like the depth, if it didn't resonate, then I pretty much had to walk away. And that's sort of a theme in my life, from a fairly young age. Um, so I've had a lot of pivots when it comes to, realizing things about myself and things that no longer fit. And the biggest one, I think, you know, probably the major life pivot was, so I'm 43 now, but when I was 38, I was like happily married to my best friend. We had 2 kids, and um, yeah, I mean, life was really grand. I was working part-time as opposed
mm,
to full-time, which is like, for me, it was like the perfect balance. I had some professional time, but I also had enough time with my, at that point, young kids. I guess they weren't that young anymore, but, uh, I spent a lot of time working out. I did yoga. Like I had plenty of time with my friends. And it was just like, my husband and I had worked really hard to like cultivate this really beautiful life. And, yeah, so things were going really well. And I, went to this party and I met this woman and, I was like thrown.
Mm.
Like I had feelings I had never felt before. And I was like, oh, like, what is this? And it threw me. I mean, I knew what it was, but it was like hard. Like I was like, I've never felt this before. So it was really odd. So
Mm.
then sort of tumbled into this, now what do I do with this? And, I was pretty direct with my husband. I was like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm feeling. And, it was really sad because, it was just this big realization that, I maybe didn't know myself as well as I thought, and it might affect people around me.
Mhm.
Which then sort of cycled into, a good long while of me spending time trying to understand myself. Because I think when, um, when something big is revealed, when you do some digging and you start to like, I guess, remove the layers of the onion, it sort of throws you a little bit because you're like, wait, what else don't I know about myself? Like this whole
Mm.
time I thought I was like this, you know, straight cisgender, like white mom. And all of a sudden I have these like massive feelings for a woman. And, um, I kind of always thought I was bi, but I was in a monogamous marriage and, a monogamous straight marriage. So it didn't really matter. I really didn't give it much thought. My mom said, marry your best friend. So I did.
Mm.
So, yeah, so I spent a lot of time trying to understand what was going on. And, I felt kind of crazy because I just thought, like, how do you go all the way through your life and then all of a sudden, you know, maybe I'm gay? Like, I don't know. Um,
And
and so I,
did you have no inkling of that? You said maybe you thought you were bisexual, but do you ever remember any time having that thought and then saying, "Nah, I got it for this, guy," or talking yourself out of it? Or was this really like just a huge surprise, these feelings?
I mean, that's such a great question. I've done a lot of unpacking on this. Looking back, there were a lot of sort of clues. My relationships with my friends who, were girls were very, very intense
Mm.
when I was a teenager. And I just kind of thought that's how it was. And come to find out, since I've met other women who have also come out later in life, that kind of tends to be a trend,
Hmm.
yeah, like a friend and I at a sleepover would like wrestle in the middle of the night. And like, that's not normal.
Mm.
I mean, no, whatever normal is. So, um, yeah. So, but at the time, I guess none of it really mattered because the bottom line for me was less about, I didn't, I mean, I'm sure I had a lot of internalized homophobia, but it was more about the fact that I was going to be impacting, this man that I loved and these kids that I loved because he had made it really clear, that if I couldn't, give him what he needed as a wife, like he didn't want to be married. And like fair enough, right?
Yeah.
Like as you talk on this show, like there's so many different types of relationships and everybody gets to author what they want.
Mhm.
And so that, there was a lot of pressure to sort of figure this out. Um, and so yeah, I spent a lot of time with myself. I did
Mm.
a lot of hiking, a lot of journaling, a lot of yoga, a lot of talking to some like really good friends. And then I also found this community online, thank goodness,
Mm.
of women who had come out later in life. And that was so helpful because it normalized it. Because at
Mhm.
first I thought I was really crazy. Like, how could you, be in midlife and all of a sudden have this realization? So yeah, I came to terms that I was in fact gay and, I had no desire to be with, men. And once you kind of have that realization, at least for me, it was like you can't undo that knowing. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
once you know something, you can't tuck it back in. So it was kind of like now what? Um, So one day I was driving down the road after I realized it and had kind of come to terms with it, but still hadn't really like, you know, my poor now ex-husband was waiting on like bated breath, like for me to like tell him. And I still hadn't like been able to bring myself to tell him yet. And I was driving down the road and I just remember thinking like, you should just drive off and into this tree over here. And I was a school counselor for 16 years, and so I was a mental health professional, and I was like, "Oh, wow, that's a big, big thought and a massive red flag." So it was scary for me, and so I, drove past my neighborhood, drove to the local park that I always used to go to hike and really kind of gather my thoughts, and just pulled into a parking spot and just cried and cried, and because it was scary. I had two kids, and it's a scary thought, and so I kind of started like, okay, what would happen? And at the time, I didn't really have the words to it, but what would happen if I lived in inauthenticity? Like that's now what I can label it as. But what would happen if I just stayed like this till my kids got out of college at least? Like I was trying to bargain, you know? And this little voice inside of me was like, you'll die.
Mm.
And I was like, I had to listen. Like I had like that, those were big words, and as somebody who um deals with mental health on a fairly regular basis with other people, like, I know those are kind of some big red flags. So at that point, I realized that the cost of inauthenticity was way bigger
Mm.
than the cost of authenticity, even knowing that this was probably going to completely change the trajectory of my life and, unravel a lot of things that I had really carefully built and, probably bring on a lot of grief and sadness and changes for, not just me, but um, my kids and my ex-husband. And so, yeah, but I think that's the point, right? That you, living inauthentically is really detrimental,
Mhm.
especially the big stuff like this. And it doesn't have to be this massive and big. It doesn't have to be this like huge discovery of yourself that you're gay in middle age, but we all are susceptible to that, and we're all
Mhm.
susceptible to living inauthentically just by the nature of being human, first of all, and trying to like find a group and fit in, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah,
yeah, it was a tough couple of years.
it is. And gosh, thank you for sharing that. And um, it is, I feel the heaviness of that moment. It is that moment where you say, like, there is a fork in the road, and I can choose to go one way and die inside, or I can choose the other way and experience kind of the death of what I thought my life would look like, but
Oof, yeah,
live, in that space of fulfillment and honoring who I am. And that moment where you're sitting looking at those two directions is really big. So I feel like I want to thank you for doing that work, because as you do that, now you are in the space where you're able to help others who are at that super like pivotal moment
yeah,
at that fork in the road to have support to go in that one direction. This is interesting. I just want to say this, like when a lot of people who listen to this podcast know that I come from a divorced family. I come from, a father who had an affair, and there was a lot of wounding around that. But when I started my healing process with that, and I actually started to have conversations with my dad as an adult, not as a 12-year-old, and having gone through a marriage and a divorce, and I was able to have a different kind of conversation with him, he expressed very similar things, and he made a different decision of how he was going to go about it. But he made that he talked about, like, what is my choice in this moment? Is my choice to stay in this marriage for everyone other than me, or is it my choice to be aligned and really, the fear of losing it all, but staying in my truth? It's a big decision. So
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah, absolutely.
how did that lead you? So once you made that big decision, right? And you're
Sure.
like, shoot, I'm going for it.
Right.
What if you could lead us through some of what happened right after that?
Oof. Yeah, it's hard to think about that time, and like
Mhm,
I'm so open, I don't mind talking about it, but it was hard. I
mhm,
mean, there's so much grief, and I always like joke that like nothing would have, you know, broken us up except for something like this because we were solid. Like my mom, I really did take to heart. My mom said, "Marry your best friend," and so I did.
mm,
And so I really took those marching orders to heart. So, yeah, it was rough. I mean, it really was this very careful unraveling
mm,
of a life, and I use those words really specifically because we were really intentional with how we lived and made decisions and created this life and, had this family, down to like ruminating for like weeks over this one dog we adopted, right? Like we
mm,
just made really careful decisions. And so to undo those careful decisions, it was painful, and, also because I was really conscious of wanting to maintain this really, really great co-parenting relationship. And,
mhm,
we parent really well together. And
mm,
I also had this idea of how our divorce could look, and, like I still wanted to hang out with him because he
mhm,
was still my friend. And, yeah, like I lost my best friend and that was really hard,
mm,
to go out on my own. And then I also had this relationship with this woman who, was my catalyst. And so you throw that in there and, you're trying to do what you can to like guide your kids through something really big and, traumatic. And
mhm,
I also worked where I lived. Like I was the school counselor at the local school. And
mm.
like, so I felt like I lived in a fishbowl because, that it's not a tiny town, but it's a small enough town that like everyone knows like your stuff. And even if that's not
Right.
true, it feels like everybody knows and is talking about it. So, yeah, I felt really raw for a while. And like I said, I kind of was like, well, crap, like what else don't I know? So it
Mm,
it took, gosh, like I mean, I'm still learning about myself. Like every day I feel like I've now come to this place where I'm like, oh, like loving, growing and changing. But at the time it was kind of disconcerting because you don't really have a place on the map. Like you're like, where am I here?
right.
Um, so it was a lot of like, okay, what am I? Who am I? And like,
Mhm,
what is authentic Laura? And like, what does that look like? And spending a lot of time trying to sort of figure that out while making money to support my two kids and now
mhm,
being a single mom and, buying a house and having to find a place to live and doing all those things that are already just tough being, human
mhm.
and living.
Yeah, and that
So
was how many you said that was about 5 years ago that it kind of
yeah,
all.
it's like wild to think about, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like, when you get to, that idea of that time really helps, when you're facing kind of the mountain and you're looking up, it looks almost impossible. Then you just start, I think, whenever I've had really super dark nights of the soul, like my
Mm,
whole being is being rattled, it is really just about taking one step, just knowing where my next footprint will be. And that's all I can see. And before you know it, if you just keep taking that one step, at a time, you realize you're halfway there. And then you just keep doing it and you realize, oh, wow, this is where I'm at. And one of the things I wanted to come back to is what you said about community. I talk about community a lot on this podcast,
mm,
specifically when you are venturing into areas that are not in your social, circles as acceptable, or if they're outside of your familiar norms or cultural norms. Um, and community is what really helps us feel not so crazy, feel a part of something. And that's why, like, the relationship diversity community is so important. It's about saying like we're in this together and we're going to support each other, right?
Yeah, I think that's like my favorite thing about coming out actually is like the people. And
Hmm.
every time like I recently quit my job and I'm now started business coaching, and it's been the coolest thing because every time you make a pivot like that, you find your people.
Hmm.
And I just love it so much. And the best thing about LGBTQ people is they tend to be, at least my friends are really open. Like
Hmm.
when I came out and I was like trying to find people, because I found people online, but then I was like, okay, well, I need to find some people near me. And I live in the burbs, and like
Hmm.
it's not necessarily easy. This is North Carolina.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the friends I found were that they were queer women. And
Mhm.
ironically enough, a lot of them were polyam and, maybe married to men and dating women, or, might also identify as lesbians. So just, have multiple relationships with women at a time. And I think that when you're queer, you've sort of already navigated this, like, I mean, I know it's not like this a ton anymore, but like this faux pas, like just this whatever is normal, quote unquote, normal society. And so they also tend to be more open to um, other things outside the quote unquote norm, right?
Mhm.
So heteronormative society, mononormative society. I mean, that's a word, right? I didn't just make that up.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, that makes sense because,
Mhm.
monogamy is pretty standard. So
Mhm.
I think I think finding community that shares values, and obviously one of the values is just acceptance and loving
Yes.
people for who they are, and again loving people for their authenticity, and
Mhm.
um even if it's not the same like who I am, like I still love you, right? And I think that's my favorite part about community and coming out is the people that I have
Yeah.
met along the way have been just so amazing, just high, high vibration, good, solid people who are just really accepting. And again, they value authenticity. And,
Mhm.
when you meet people who have similar values to you, it's just a beautiful, you know,
Yeah.
beautiful serendipitous thing.
And the courage to to really breathe into who you really are. When you meet someone who has had a coming out process, regardless of which,
Sure.
societal
Right.
norm
There's
they're coming
several.
out
Yeah.
from, right? It's like, "Oh, I know what you've gone through," even if it's a silent like, "Yeah, I got ya,
Yeah, I
I
see,
got
like,
ya."
yeah, I see you. I see you.
Mhm,
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, I mean, I'm a lover of people.
mhm,
I'm someone who can connect with a whole bunch of different types of people. But I must tell you that, I mean, my favorites are the ones who have come out in some way,
mhm,
because it's just, you don't have to, it's like this protection. Like,
mm,
that they get you, like they know the risk that you've taken and they've taken it too. And it's like a silent bond. So yeah, I think
yeah.
you're absolutely right with that.
Yeah, and so I've found too that it's happening all of this is happening more than you think it is, like, there's lots of
Oh
these
yeah,
underground movements, and that's
100%.
right, and that's one of the reasons why it was so important for me to do this podcast is because I feel like I have, so much privilege in terms not only in terms of how, I live and my home and my family and the acceptance that I've had that I have to be one of those people that speaks out for those that can't. And, I've had experiences with other people. It's like, people don't know this about me. This is actually what's going on. And I hope to normalize it, but it is like a secret handshake. It's like, oh, see, that's going on way more,
I know. Yeah.
way more than I ever thought when you start to look into it, right?
Hmm.
I want to ask you how you work with clients. How do you help people move from the kind of inauthentic living to more authentic living?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I was just talking to someone this morning, and as I kind of like said, it doesn't have to be like this massive, like mine was kind of a big shift, right? But this morning I was talking to a woman who was in a job that just didn't really fit her anymore. And she knew it, but she just wasn't listening or
Mm,
making the change that she needed to. And she ended up being really sick, like
mm,
physically sick from it.
mm,
And I think that that's why it is so important to listen to yourself and take time to like feel those things out. Because it really can affect so much in our life when we're living in inauthenticity. And another point to be made is that sometimes people don't even understand what it is they're feeling. You
mhm,
know, um, I think that that's really what it comes down to is sometimes people feel like maybe their pants are too tight,
mm,
but they don't know what size fits them. And I'm just using it as a metaphor,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
you don't know what the problem is or, but like the tag that you knew um,
Mhm,
and so part of working with an authenticity coach is that you really are given that space to start to like unravel all that stuff, right? The way that I coach is really about creating a safe space for people to come and unravel, right?
mm,
And I ask really inquisitive questions. I'm just really curious. There's no judgment. I simply reflect back a lot of what is being said, which is a really interesting technique because when you have someone reflect back to you what you said, you're like, wait, I said that? Ooh,
right.
like I
Yeah.
didn't know that's how it sounded. And then
Uh-huh.
you start to question, like, I wonder why I said that. So, coaching's not this like massively mystical thing, but I'm so passionate about it because I've had coaches and um, it's just this really amazing journey and it gets you from point A to point B faster. And
Yes.
part of my why is like, my gosh, I so wish I had had a coach
Mhm.
like 5 years ago. I went to therapy, but it was fine, but I didn't need it. Like to the point that my therapist even like fired me. She's like, listen, you really don't. She's like, you don't need therapy. And and she was right. Like I didn't have a diagnosis, like I didn't have anxiety or depression. I just needed a me. Like I needed somebody to sit and reflect
Mm,
and ask really good questions and be curious and just give me really undivided attention, especially because I was an empath. So
mhm,
like I couldn't
mhm.
talk to anybody who like had any sort of buy-in in the situation at all because I just took on like my ex-husband's like grief,
Yes.
and my girlfriend's anger and like
Uh,
so you know yeah. So having a coach, just someone who is unbiased, is gifted with presence
mhm.
and curiosity and non-judgment and love. Um, it's like I said, it's not some mystical technique, but it's really, really valuable. And then in between, like there's obviously exercises that I might give clients to sort of do in between sessions and do a little bit of digging. A lot of that sort of happens. A lot of it kind of happens in between sessions, like
Mhm.
realizations and like, oh my gosh, this is what happened. Let's dig into this. So yeah, it's a really cool process. I love it. I'm just really passionate about it. And I feel like I'm just a massive coaching cheerleader. Like you have to try coaching. It's so great, you know?
Absolutely. And another reason why I think working with an authenticity coach like you is so helpful is because when we are facing something scary and and there's something that's more comfortable over to the right instead of the scary thing that's over to the left, we're probably going to go over to the right. And the authenticity coach or a coach will, gently with, and I can tell, Laura, I know you're like this, like lovingly say, it's really okay what you're thinking. It's really okay what you're feeling. I'm going to hold you with that and tell you it's okay. And I'm going to feed back and I'm going to help to gently guide you over to the left so that we can, start moving you into a life that you feel more joyful, more aligned with. So I would absolutely 100% agree with you about working with a coach. I have had to and still do, especially when I'm really starting to look at something deep within me. And so I recommend everyone going over to Laura's website to check out what she does. The link will be in the show notes. And I want to ask you this one last thing. Let's say someone's out there listening and they feel something's just not right in their life
Mm,
and
mhm.
they are struggling and they're not quite ready to go and, hire you as a coach. What is one step that they can take to help them move forward in their authenticity journey?
Yeah, I think probably the most transformative thing that you can do is to learn to like sit in the moment and be
Mm,
like really mindful.
mm,
And mindfulness is kind of like this token word and you know, but like really figure out what it means to sit with yourself.
mhm,
Our minds are these brilliant, brilliant things like to keep us safe. And
mm,
they're programmed to keep us from being killed. Well, in this modern world, you know, our brains think coming out is like being attacked by a bear or like
mhm,
anything scary. So they're always going to tell us these thoughts that like, don't do it, or this could happen, or this could happen. But it doesn't mean that it's true, right?
mhm,
So you have to be able to like be like, thank you, brain. I appreciate you. Thank you for your thoughts. I'm going to choose not to think that, right? And spend some time journaling or
mhm,
recording yourself. I did a lot of recording myself on a telephone. Like I had an
mm,
app on my phone and I go back and listen now and I'm like, oh, baby girl, whew,
mm,
that's some heavy stuff. But like it was really good to hear myself talk back,
mm.
because I wasn't ready to like I needed to hear the words. And if you're not ready to work with a coach, at least that way you can sort of hold space for yourself almost, and hear what you're saying and how you're sounding. And that can be really helpful. So either recording yourself on your phone or journaling is helpful or, yeah, getting the words out. I would say if you don't want to do that, then at least taking time to get out in nature and walk and
Mm.
think, and sort of be able to process away from the noise of other people,
Yes.
getting away from other people's energy, and I always push going outside because there's so much good vibes that come from being outside with, in nature.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah, but
I love that
yeah.
aspect of exercise or just walking even because I think that our mind reflects our body. So if we're moving our body, we're able to move some thoughts in our mind. It's when we're
Oh yeah.
sitting still and just going crazy in our own thoughts that they get stuck. So I love that idea of going outside, walking, taking deep breaths. And
Mm,
one other thing I'll add that has really helped me is acknowledging the feelings, even if it is a feeling of uncomfortableness, like I feel that in my stomach. And so I'll just put my hand on my stomach and just say hello to that feeling, like just acknowledge hello.
yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
you. It's okay. I love you. You're safe. I feel you. And really just talk to that sensation. So that also helps to move the energy a little bit.
Yeah, right. Because we're not taught, gosh, we don't do a great job teaching people how to deal with uncomfortable things, do we?
Mm,
Right? Like
hmm.
I never got taught how to like do what you're talking about. And like,
Never.
thank goodness, we're learning as we're older. And I hope that I'm teaching my kids now, but that's why you overeat or overdrink or,
Mhm.
buy things you don't need because being uncomfortable and really it's just like an energetic vibration. Like,
Yeah.
our brain likes to tell us it's like this huge, massive thing. And don't get me wrong, like there are some feelings that are big and raw
Yeah.
and hard, but they're also temporary,
Yes. Yes. And
right?
okay, I'm going to add on to that because this is
Yeah.
really great because um what I lead clients through is actually disconnecting the conclusion of what that sensation is from the actual sensation. So I'll bring them into like their
Ooh, I love
belly
that.
and say, okay, so what does it feel like? And usually they go to, well, I just feel scared. What, then I like disconnect that. What does the sensation feel like? And you say hello to the sensation and just interrupt that moment where you go to
Mm-hmm.
the conclusion of what it is. It's just a
Right.
sensation. So I love what you said that.
Yeah. Like once you realize it's just energy,
Mhm.
you let it like move through you and then it
Mhm.
goes somewhere else. But like the thing is, when you don't acknowledge it, it gets stuck, right? And that's
Yeah.
why, we cry when we do yoga because our hips are full of
Yes.
like energy that we haven't gotten rid of or let go of. So, yeah. So I guess that's what I would say is start noticing your emotions and start noticing the discomfort and don't run. Just
Mm.
sit. And if you
Yeah.
can't even like be thankful for it and say, hey, I see you, thank you, just at least notice. I
Mhm.
think noticing awareness, probably the first step to any sort of growth and change, wouldn't you say?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Acknowledgement and just like, yeah, awareness. Awareness is number one. Awareness.
Yeah.
And then acknowledgement, just acknowledging that it's there, and then acceptance.
Yeah.
Um,
A
and
hundred percent.
and really to re-emphasize community, finding community. Look on the internet, find a safe community, come over to the
Yeah.
relationship diversity community, because there
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
accepting and loving and inclusive and want you to be yourself. And, I know some of the biggest healing experience I've had with clients is really just saying it's okay. Like
Mm.
that thing that you've held for 30 years that you've told yourself is an absolutely horrible thing is really okay. And it's just like people's energies
Yeah.
totally change after that, right?
100%. Yeah. Like just being in a non-judgmental space does wonders so
Yeah.
much. And, if people aren't ready to like buy coaching from you or buy coaching from me or, um, I try to give a lot of value on my
Mhm.
social media. I try to
Great.
do like daily tips and tricks and just things that I hope are helpful for people. Um, just for free. So,
Yeah.
we can tag that down below too, if they want to follow me on Instagram or TikTok. And I try to put value out into the world that way too. So not just coaching, but, you know.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love your IG notes from your coach. I reposted one of your stuff because it really spoke to me.
Did you?
And
Oh, I didn't see that.
yeah, yeah. And there is a lot of free resources. So it really comes down to your decision. If you're listening to this right now, it comes down to you taking the first step. The support is
Yep.
out there, whether through, things that are completely free, or whether you want to really dive into it by coming into a community or hiring Laura as a coach. The resources are there, and we're here to support you on your journey. So I will
Yeah.
tag everything. I'll tag Laura, your website down below, and all of your social accounts. So we'd love to connect with you there. Anything else you'd like to leave us with?
No, I just thank you so much for having me on, Carrie. I'm so glad I met you.
I am too. The universe brought us together. I'm so, so thankful.
Yes, me
And
too.
everyone, please follow up with us. We'd love to connect with you. Thank you, Laura. Thanks so much for listening to the Relationship Diversity Podcast. Want to learn more about relationship diversity? I've got a free guide I'd love to send you. Go to www.relationshipdiversitypodcast.com to get yours sent right to you. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast. You being here and participating in the conversation about relationship diversity is what helps us create a space of inclusivity and acceptance together. The more comfortable and normal it is to acknowledge the vast and varied relating we all do, the faster we'll shift to a paradigm of conscious, intentional, and diverse relationships. New episodes are released every Thursday. Stay connected with me through my website, carriejaroslow.com, Instagram, or TikTok. Stay curious. Every relationship is as unique as you are. Are you feeling stuck or unfulfilled in your intimate relationship? Do all your relationships end in the same way? Do you feel like you've lost the spark in your current relationship? Can you never even find one person who you want to explore a relationship with? If you answered yes to any of those questions, are sick and tired of feeling like a failure in your relationships, and desperately desire a different experience, then my 8-week deep reprogramming intensive may be the answer for you. In this program, I work individually with you for 8 transformative weeks. We'll identify the subconscious programming that's keeping you stuck and shift it to a new affirming belief systems. We go deep, we get real, we get results. This is healing unlike anything you've ever experienced before. Here's what people are saying. Jordan from North Carolina said, more has shifted in 8 weeks of working with Carrie than 10 years of psychotherapy. Jane from Sanford, North Carolina said, it's honestly changed my life. And Cassie from Santa Barbara, California said, Carrie's laser precision in helping me diagnose where the stuck energy was helped me make positive movement in our first session alone. Absolutely transformational. I love being a guide and witness to these courageous people who claim that they were done with their past experiences and ready for something different. I'm opening a limited number of spots for 2023 and would love to help you permanently transform your relationship experience. To set up a free 30-minute clarity call where I'll help you uncover your number one block to fulfilling relationships, connect with me through the link in the show notes. You are worthy of experiencing deep fulfillment and love in your relationships. This intensive work will help you get there.